Hi, this is Shane Starr, and today I am continuing my third in a series of 8 videos about improving our cognitive functions through the study of philosophical masterpieces. This is a series where I combine my passion for typology with my education and experience in philosophy to help our viewers live their best lives. We do that by targeting specific cognitive functions and forthcoming Enneagram fixations. And we'll use our philosophical masterpieces as roadmaps on our way towards self-actualization in these realms. So I like to repeat our method in case you haven't seen the other videos. And I think we've established both collectively as a community and personally in my own videos that the best functions to target in MBTI terms are the tertiary and inferior functions, that's the third and fourth function, and the eighth function, aka the demon function. In Socionics, the same function is the role function, and the mobilizing and suggestive functions are the same third and fourth that we find in MBTI. So that explains the functions and the information metabolism elements in Socionics, and from there we can move forward. I think it's good to start with ones you can target, but I would suggest a holistic view of all of these just so you can be the most well-rounded you can be. And if you don't like the way I'm teaching it, then you can study your own way, and as long as you're moving forward, right? So today we are doing TI, Introverted Thinking. The way I like to go through the functions is I take my most trusted sources and I find all the overlap and I cut everything else out. So anything that like one source has that the others leave out, I'm not going to include it. I don't want any outliers. I want basic definitions that we can all pretty much agree on. So with introverted thinking, this is a rational cognitive function or element that focuses on internal logic and a subjective understanding of ideas that involves analytical formation, categorization, and internal frameworks of systems based on logical valued principles. So basically logical structure, internal frameworks, and this is TI. Good TI, it's logical consistency, ideational coherence, that means your ideas don't contradict each other, a deeper, detailed understanding of things and people that just like demonstrates a more deep dive into the knowledge of how something actually works. Okay. To the opposite of that, bad TI, it would be confusion. I see most often a difference between someone's beliefs and how they live. Like when there's a big gap there, it usually signifies low TI to me. Misunderstandings about how things work at work, trouble learning systems, trouble understanding what the systems actually do, why they're there, the principles behind what we do. Sometimes, you think how a parrot can copy a human, but it doesn't understand what it's doing. That's how I think low TI people are in the workplace. Oftentimes they can learn what to do, but they don't understand anything beneath the surface. And that makes it, it's interesting watching and torture if you work with someone like that. Because they have difficulty understanding what they're doing, and it leads to errors that the rest of us have to fix. So I'd say the last thing that distinguishes bad TI is an inability to separate their feelings from their objective opinion. Um, you know, I don't want to break it up into gender, but just something I'm familiar with guys with low TI. They have difficulty betting against their favorite team, even when their favorite team's an underdog. It's like, no, man, I'm going to put my money at, my Raiders or whatever. It's like, dude, I'm a Raiders fan too, but they're playing the defending world champs at home for the champs. There's no way our team's going to win. That's a stupid bet. I find people with low TI can't make that distinction. They're stuck on, oh, dude, you're not a real fan. How can you go against your team? It's like, I'm not playing against them. I'm not going against them. I can just separate my opinion in my brain from my wishes in my heart. I find that people with low TI have a difficult time doing that. So, what are some more examples of struggles here? Again, inconsistent beliefs, difficulty in operating complex systems, let alone understanding them. And this stems from a lack, again, of understanding how they work. I find that even with good students, I mean, low TI people aren't necessarily dumb, but you'll see someone with good grades, but they get bad test scores. And they'll say something to the effect like, well, I don't do good on tests, but I'm smart. I learn. And again, it's almost like that parroting effect. They learn how to manage without it. The successful ones do. But tested on purely intellectual concepts and logical problems, they tend to not do well on that. This comes out, Eric, with typing with famous people. When he tests people, which I took his test too, he tests for polar TI, and it's amazing watching someone who's otherwise smart struggle with these systems. Who's your sister's brother's uncle's father, and they just can't figure it out, and they're just stuck, and it's like, dude, that's your grandma, don't you know? And they just can't think. And I watched a few times since I took my test other people struggle with that, and it's like, wow, this is low TI at work. I would also say emotional decision making, sometimes low vocabulary, but not always. Trouble with correlations. A lot of times it looks either one way. Either they can't see the connection or they can see every connection. And it's like, no, those, INFP and Enneagram 8 don't correlate. No, dude, they really could, because you're just closed-minded. You don't see, it's like anything's possible. It's like, all right, whatever, bro. That's kind of how it works. So, difficulties with abstract thinking concepts. So that's what struggles with this function look like. Now, if you're a polar TI type, it's nearly hopeless. I mean, you can work on it. You can get it up to speed, I guess, a little bit, but you're never going to be really good at it. But if TI is falling in your third or fourth or eighth function slot, or it's your role, mobilizing or suggestive function, then you have a shot, and you should work on it, and you can start flexing that muscle and make it better. So, moving on, our author and work today, it is none other than Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel of Stuttgart, Germany. His dates are 1770 to 1831. He died in a cholera epidemic, as he was the chair of philosophy at the University of Berlin. So he's known for 19th century German idealism, which is really, in a nutshell, the opposite of skepticism. We started, with in European philosophy, David Hume was the main skeptic, Scottish philosopher. He thought that we can't know with certainty much of anything. Then after him came Immanuel Kant, who said, you know what, we can know that something is, but we can never get at what it really is, but we know it's there. So we can use cause and effect, but we can't know the thing in itself, Kant called it. So we could have stopped philosophy right there, but Hegel and the other idealists didn't want to. They said, no, reason, through reason, we'll figure it out eventually. It's really a scientific mindset, oftentimes overlooked when people are critical of Hegel's philosophy. But his main goal was knowledge. He believed in the power of reason. He thought that eventually we would know everything. And he believed that this worked with what's called the dialectical movement of knowledge. There's a thesis, then an antithesis, which combined go into a synthesis, which is in effect the new thesis. And time just rolls on, and he had very ambitious thoughts about this. He thought that eventually, and he's been accused of pantheism by the Christian community. Now, Hegel was a Lutheran. He went to church every Sunday. However, more traditional Christians accused him of pantheism because, for those of you who don't know, pantheism is the idea that the universe is God and we're just expressions of God. And again, Hegel was accused of this. Now, Hegel almost could be called a panentheist, which it's almost like the universe is God's body and rational minds make up, as collectively speaking, God's mind. And even though Hegel would probably argue against this, it fits with his philosophy in that reason continues onward until it eventually culminates in knowing itself in a world of absolute spirit transcending everything before it. And that was his overreaching goal. Now, he follows this line of thought in various papers, but it comes out most in this book, Phenomenology of Spirit. And again, he starts off with basic awareness, which leads to self-awareness, which reason as a vehicle becomes more aware of things and workings in the universe. This happens at the individual level and at the collective level. Again, Hegel was writing during the time of the French Revolution. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of developments of thought, and I think in the zeitgeist of that time, his philosophy sort of matches with it in just being swept along by this very enthusiastic, optimistic feeling that human beings, it's almost like the second Renaissance. Human beings are going to know the whole universe. And he didn't think that was necessarily an anti-religious thing, although Marx took Hegelian thought in that direction. So it can work both ways. So it was a very ambitious project, theory of everything. I'll read what I think was his takeaway quote, and let me look at this. This is so much more boring than those videos with all the graphics and colors, I know, but hopefully you're getting good information here. So let's see. So Hegel said, it is the nature of humanity to press onward to agreement with others through the dialectical method, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, new thesis. And human nature can only really exist as this achievement from a community of minds working together, moving forward through history. He said that anti-human, the merely animal, consists in staying within the sphere of feeling and being able to communicate only at that level. In other words, feeling is subhuman. It's just pure emotions with no intellect or purpose base. I don't think Hegel would be a fan of SE or FI for that matter. But basically saying feeling is a weakness, knowledge is the power, or at the very least, knowledge is the seed of power. One still has to act on it. We'll save that for the next video. But I think the takeaway quote here culminates in the phrase that we all know: knowledge is power. Okay? So, what new perspective do we have on TI with Hegel's contribution? I would say through Hegel's analysis, we find that introverted thinking, perhaps more than any other function or informational metabolism element, it represents knowledge. Knowledge is indeed power. And what does this look like in the real world? Knowing the details, the structure, the purpose of whatever system you're working on, whether that's philosophical, whether it's employment or work or career related, whether it's a system inherent in a relationship or virtually any life problem you're experiencing, money, knowing the ins and outs, knowing the inner details, reading the fine print, knowing what you're doing, that will provide you with the knowledge, which will lead to the purpose and then the power to build on this knowledge. And that'll ultimately make your life better. And in fact, I would say that's a guiding principle of what I'm doing with these videos. I'm trying to take all the knowledge of what the typology community has come up with and shift it to where regular people can actually get something tangible out of it. And that's more of a TE experiment, I know, but you can't do TE without some degree of TI. That's my personal belief. You have to know what you're doing and in order to do it correctly or to do it well. And to the extent that you know what you're doing, that gives you a head start on doing it well. Now, again, some people learn to live without that. They learn how to mimic or copy or parrot procedures and techniques, and they can get away with doing a thing well without good TI, but that's fake. That's not the real thing. And unless it's your polar function, you should be able to work on your TI to make it better. All right, so what does this look like in practice? It's like, okay, so I see Hegel's the TI guru. I have a good idea what TI is. How can I work on my TI moving forward to make it better? Flex that TI muscle. I would say first, examine your behaviors. Look into your personal history with, brutal, absolute honesty. Look at the roots of your beliefs, your behavior, your mistakes you've made. And I would say to resolve to focus and understand the underlying model of how these things happened. If your actions that you're looking at are the leaves and the flowers, go into the branches, go all the way down into the roots and find out, the sources, back to how your mother and father or siblings or family or culture you lived in acted, how that's contributed to your life and how that has contributed to both the good and the bad that you've done. That's the overall focus. Now we'll get into some more specifics. I would say typing people, at least trying to type people on your own, learning how to categorize things, that's what an ESTP looks like. That's what an INFJ looks like. Look at anything that requires categorization, either at work or for a hobby. If you're into flowers, categorize those flowers. If you're into cars, categorize the cars. Group them into different eras, then group them into different types like car, truck, wagon, SUV. Structure them into different company models, structure them into different colors if you have to. Learn how to start categorizing things. That's a good start. Focus on your vocabulary. Learn a new word every day. And not just the word, but synonyms and antonyms. Know that word's place in the overlying structure, the bigger picture. Know know the system behind the word. Root words. When you learn a foreign language like German or French, root words become very important, especially like in Greek and Latin. But any language requires that. So for those of you who know two languages or more, you know what I'm talking about here. I would say identify the most important principles in your life. Consider the consistency of your life in accordance with these principles. That's a first quickest way to tell if you have good TI or bad TIs. People with bad TI, you see them. You see them in jail. People who've killed, raped, murdered, stolen, and they wear crosses around their necks and stuff. It's funny. And I've seen it the other way. Proud atheists who nevertheless stick to this strong, strict moral perspective that's every bit as ethical and morally strenuous as any Christian ethic, and but they don't believe in what is behind it, which, and again, I think is illogical. But Nietzsche wouldn't like it either. You want to be consistent with your beliefs and your actions. All right. Write things down. Notice where there's incongruence and move to fix it. Play devil's advocate with yourself. Take a look at your arguments for things you trust and believe in that you think are right and true, and turn it on its head and say, if I was hired as a lawyer to poke holes in my own theory, what would I say? And work on that. Be able to know the ins and outs. There's no type better than this at this than ENTPs. Find an ENTP to talk to, and they can play devil's advocate with you forever. Take any side. Try to get a little bit of that into your repertoire. I would say ultimately for a good TI, you want to. Something I forgot to say, I think word games are really good. Word games, logic games, even crossword puzzles. Sudoku, it's a different kind of crossword puzzle that's in newspapers. Checkers, chess, anything requiring knowing a larger system and moves are made in the context of greater principles. That will help flex your TI. Last but not least, I know I've already said it in other ways, but be true to yourself. That is, and I don't mean in a heartfelt moral way, but just in terms of principles. Know who you are, know what you stand for, and don't break those principles. Do that, and you're on your way to having good TI. That's all I have for now. I'm going to record my TE video later. I'm done with all my videos, by the way, with the informational part. I just have to get these out. So I'm going to finish the series this week, and then we'll do the same thing with the Enneagram coming up. That's it for now. Have a good one. Peace out.